Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Joseph Ryder Anderson podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Anderson, and today we're going to be diving into the latest and first ever Union Arena English version regional championship. This tournament had a little bit of a surprise twist to it. One deck massively dominated that tournament, and that deck was none other than the brand new Roy Mustang Blue Full Metal Alchemist deck. We're going to be diving into the ins and outs of the tournament and looking at even some of the deck lists and insights that we've gained from the tournament to get a better picture of where the Union Arena Full Metal Alchemist, post Full Metal Alchemist meta is headed and what to look out for in future tournaments and regionals. So with that being said, let's go ahead and dive into it all. So here we have the meta breakdown provided by EX Burst, and as you can see, Full Metal Alchemist Blue Mustang, Roy Mustang, the heavy favorite in the top 16, making up seven full decks. Almost half of the top 16 decks were Roy Mustang, which is absolutely incredible. In second, we do have Purple Bleach, which is a deck that is not exactly surprising to see would end up so highly ranked. Purple Bleach was one of the top decks to watch going into this regional. But I will say Full Metal Alchemist Blue started showing some serious promise even ahead of this regional with taking a lot of top place wins at more local based tournaments. It could be that Roy Mustang has something of a favorable matchup into Purple Bleach, right? It did have to face down many Purple Bleach decks, including just different versions of the deck, the hybrid version, the Renji Rush version, in order to get to the top. So you could extrapolate from that the Roy Mustang Full Metal Alchemist Blue deck is something of a counter pick to the uber popular Bleach Purple strategy. Let's go ahead now and look into the decks themselves. So this is something fresh, the Full Metal Alchemist Roy Mustang top first place deck from Something Fresh. This deck is pretty incredible. We have here, of course, the card that really makes this deck sing, and that is none other than Roy Mustang himself. Roy Mustang, you can't really look at the Roy Mustang deck and not see how much potential there is in this guy. I originally ranked Roy Mustang more as, in my ranking, an A tier as opposed to an S tier, simply because I felt the removal from Purple Bleach would be more attractive to people and a little more consistent than a removal from Roy Mustang. And the primary reason for that is Purple Bleach's removal relies on having cards in the sideline, whereas Roy Mustang relies on having cards in your hand. And it's a little easier to fuel your sideline than it is to keep making sure you have enough cards to then discard to activate his effect. However, the big differentiator here for Roy Mustang versus the likes of a 5-cost Ichigo is that Roy Mustang can reuse his when attacking effect turn after turn. So this puts a phenomenal amount of pressure on your opponent to remove the Roy Mustang before he can take two removals 2 consecutive turns in a row. While taking one removal with Roy Mustang can certainly be enough to set your opponent back, taking two can be deadly for your opponent. 2 in a row, especially from the same card. That's just getting an incredible amount of value off of a single card. And beyond the removal, Roy Mustang also has a built-in draw engine, and gains impact when you have no cards in your hand. And that's going to happen quite a bit with a deck that loves to remove cards when attacking. So you have just a really, really powerful card in the form of 5-cost Roy Mustang. Of course, you do pair him with Hawkeye to get his maximum effect. Hawkeye is going to be the card you use to bring your opponent's characters down to size. You can use this to take out bigger characters with higher BP, but you can also use this to make it easier to take out smaller chump blockers. That's what LullabyAnto, he did a great job keeping everyone updated with what was going on at the tournament, and he pointed that out as one of the plays he saw most frequently was to use this combo to take out chump blockers and then force your opponent to block attacks with their stronger characters. This sort of acts like a double removal by doing this. You get rid of the small characters with the effect and then the bigger characters with the attack. Riza Hawkeye also having 4000 BP combined with an effect that is so fundamentally important for this strategy is something very nice to have and a huge advantage for this deck. And you do have this 4-cost Edward Elric, which has come about even before this tournament. I was seeing lots of players sharing their winning lists that included this Edward Elric card. He comes in active if you just pay 1 life. And you add that card to your hand, so it does also act like a draw in and of itself. You get added resources, so think of it that way, not just a pure drawback. And this character does gain impact if you place 2 cards from your hand into the sideline. I can see this being a really powerful finishing combo. Use this to empty your hand, and then you have Edward Elric, and if you have the Roy Mustang card in the field, you have 2 characters with impact to close out the game. So why did this deck do so well at this tournament that almost half the top 16 were Roy Mustang? I think there's a couple of things. I don't think it's just that we're going to see Roy Mustang dominating everything from now on. I think that Roy Mustang was a little bit undervalued going into this tournament. I think people underestimated what he's capable of in the right circumstances. I think a lot of people probably didn't know as well how to deal with Roy Mustang. We've had a lot more time to practice against the likes of Purple Bleach and other decks in the meta, whereas we've had relatively little time to practice against Roy Mustang. Remember, there's been a lot of rare battles and things of that nature happening, so players just haven't had a huge opportunity to play against Roy Mustang and probably don't realize just what he can do if he's left around to take removals turn after turn. So I think that added a lot of reason to why Roy Mustang topped this final so well. Of course, obviously, there's player skill and things like that. You cannot downplay the preparedness and skill of the player piloting this deck. But I do think that played into it. And I think that could also be one thing that we did see is Code Geass Purple was completely not present in the top 16, and it could be a lot of players have been following the trend. We've been seeing this as a trend in the meta that Code Geass Purple has been losing steam as of late. We do have a Volume 2 coming out soon, so I'm sure a lot of players are just not really wanting to run a Volume 1 deck when there's a Volume 2 so close at hand at a tournament like this. So perhaps Code Geass Purple could handle Roy Mustang a little bit easier, right, than Purple Bleach can. So I think that could have played a little bit of a role too, as we see Code Geass Purple get an upgrade, Code Geass Green get an upgrade, and as well as the powerful blue Levi deck from Attack on Titan coming out. I don't think that we're going to see Roy Mustang dominating the meta post those sets the way he currently is or at least did at this regional. But I definitely think Roy Mustang is going to be a mainstay in the Union Arena meta for some time, definitely for many, many months, and most likely throughout 2025. So definitely a solid deck, and one to try out yourself if you're interested in playing a relatively new and powerful removal deck. Moving on here, we do know from LullabyAnto again that although this deck isn't listed on EXPurst, the second place Bleach deck focused heavily on Renji and the new raidless Ichigo that can gain damage too if you have 10 cards in the removal area. So that was the main focus of this deck. This is essentially an upgraded Renji Rush, which was once one of the top decks in the format in Union Arena meta, and it looks like it's back again. So this version of the Ichigo Renji, focusing on the Renji and the raidless 4-cost Ichigo, could certainly come back as a mainstay in the meta moving forward. And of course, let's go ahead and dive in here into the Purple Bleach. Squad Zero and Ichigo Hybrid. We've talked about this deck so much, so we're not going to talk about it a whole lot here. But this deck is just an insane combination of really unparalleled draw and removal. It's a really, really strong deck. And you have access to this powerful site card, the Royal Palace, letting you essentially draw a card every turn. You have 2 powerful removal tools in the form of Ichigo Kurosaki and Senjumaru, and then you are able to boost Ichigo Kurosaki, the 4-cost, to not only a damage 2 with Nullify Impact, but also one with Impact 1. A very, very powerful play, and it really stands to reason why Purple Bleach would be the second top deck, the deck with the most play share, and also getting second place in the tournament, but the deck with the most play share at the tournament. In 7th by Div, we have Jujutsu Kaisen Purple with Todo. The real standout character here, there's 3 of them, mostly 2 of them, and that's Todo himself. So we have the 5-cost Todo capable of switching characters swapping characters between the opposing characters between the energy and frontline. This works exceptionally well against high energy decks, like high energy green decks that really need to build up a specific kind of energy line to play their strongest characters. But it can also be a really effective tool against lower energy decks that run a max of 4, for example, energy cost characters. If you manage to pull up one of their relatively few 2 energy gen characters, it can make it really hard for them to rebound from that, and sometimes has a devastating impact on the game. You also have the Mechamaru character. We've talked about this before, but Mechamaru has this powerful win play that lets you choose between 2 very solid options, one of them being removing a character and the other one straight up removing a site. And this works on just about any site. The only one I can think of that it doesn't work on is that Gateway of Truth from Fullmetal Alchemist Yellow, but it doesn't look like Fullmetal Alchemist Yellow was a big issue at this particular tournament. So essentially you have carte blanche to just get rid of any site that you want to get rid of, and that works especially well into Sakuna builds with Malevolent Shrine, but more particularly for this tournament, the Royal Palace. You're really going to want to use that to get rid of Royal Palace and slow down your opponent's capabilities to draw cards. And there is also this Kasumi Miwa, 4 cost, 2 action cost, Kasumi Miwa, 4 energy cost, 2 action point cost. And this character has been showing up in a ton of purple Toto decks with the double attack and other goodies included. I think this is definitely a good option to include 2 of these in your own purple Toto deck. And we have the One Punch Man Yellow, no deck list provided, but One Punch Man, it's not surprising this deck would be included in the top of the meta, because One Punch Man, especially in this current format with so many Roy Mustangs running around, having an attacker like the 5-cost Saitama who cannot be removed by opponent's effects is going to be really, really helpful into this kind of a meta. Really having decent matchups into all these other decks except for maybe the Code Geass Red, which we'll talk about in a moment. But I think we'll see One Punch Man. I've said this all the time, but we'll see One Punch Man continue to be relevant in the meta going forwards. And then in 12th by Fabio, we have the blue JJK Sukuna Nanami build. Really, it would be more surprising not to see this deck end up in the top 16. It has been showing clear signs of being the favored way to build blue JJK post Volume 2, running the 4 Sukunas and then the Nanami engine that you're trying to get down to 15 cards or less to really boost up your Nanami. And as we've gone over before, Volume 2 just gave you so many more reliable ways to get down to 15 cards in your deck to access some of your strongest plays. And then in 15th by Marcelo is a really rogue deck. There's no other way to call this deck but a rogue deck. And that is the Code Geass Red Aggro deck. This deck, it's really exciting to see this deck end up in the top 16, given this deck came out end of last year and is still able to go up against these incredibly powerful and new builds, even with Volume 2s out there. And this deck really relies on this Suzaku Karugi 4-cost character to get off. He comes in with impact and lets you restand cards after being played. And that's everything from the regional to cover. If you like that content, make sure you like and subscribe on the YouTube channel, but also check out www.josephryderanderson.com for all of my latest stuff on the Union Arena meta, deck builds, market guides, and all that good stuff. Until next time, keep on battling.